related to Trump's recent executive order about voter ID. Now, I've been warning you guys for a while, and I tweeted this actually yesterday. Maybe I should just pull that up real quick. I'll go pull that up. I have been warning people for years that this immigration talk, the border talk, it's not that it's not a real issue. Yes, it's true that there are horrible government policies that typically come from progressives that let people out of jail and prison whenever they've been, involved in all kinds of horrible crimes, and they just act like it's no big deal. That's a fact. And at the same time, there's also, here, let me pull this up. There's also people who are pushing for open border policies, which have led to bad outcomes. That's a real thing. I'm not trying to downplay that that's a real thing. What I am trying to say, and what I've been trying to warn people for years, is that this was being done on purpose. This is how the predator class operates. They play both sides. This is the Hegelian dialectic. This is the false binary that they put you in. And so they allow a problem to fester or to get to the point that the people are like, please save us, do something about this. And then what is the solution? More militarization of the border, more rounding up of people and deporting people to other countries, whether they were guilty or not. And then, of course, well, we got to stop all the illegal voters, so we got to pass a voter ID. And voter ID, I'm not saying that people shouldn't ask for ID, but you could use just an old, normal, typical ID that we've had for generations. But what's really happening is this part of a push towards digital ID. This is what I tweeted yesterday. I've been warning people for years that the growth of the police state would be to use immigration as an excuse to bring militarization into the homeland. Now we're seeing it. Here's some of my reports over the years and solutions. And this is one from a couple years back. The fight against immigration welcomes the police state. Mass surveillance on the border is meant for Americans. What Dave Smith gets wrong and right about libertarianism and borders. That's a report I did last year. And then some solutions. I talk about the freedom cells idea applied to immigration raids and how we could protect ourselves and our friends and family from these gang members. And then this is how you stop a government kidnapping, showing an example of a community coming together to protect one of their own from kidnapping. And then this one was written by Don Villa, contributor at the Conscious Resistance. Trump's immigration crackdown only empowers the police state. This is the message we've been saying for years. So now here we are, and Trump is passing executive orders, a new executive order, which he signed on March 25th, so just about a week ago, called Preserving and Protecting Integrity of American Elections. And as I outline in here, this executive order is aimed at securing U.S. elections after years of claims of widespread voter fraud and illegal voting. And as I say here, while there does exist some element of truth to these claims, they are being exploited to push the U.S. closer to requiring digital IDs, not only for voting, but for daily life. And the executive order states that, quote, the U.S. fails to enforce basic and necessary election protections employed by modern developed nations. And it highlights how nations like India and Brazil are tying voter identification to a biometric database. I'm sure that's something Trump and his team want. And although the executive order does not explicitly mention the U.S. having a database yet, that is absolutely part of the long-term plans. And the executive order outlines what qualifies as documentary proof of U.S. citizenship, including an identification document which is, quote, compliant with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates that the applicant is a citizen of the United States. For those who don't remember, the Real ID Act was passed in 2005 after a recommendation by the fraudulent 9/11 Commission in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Many U.S. states have resisted implementing the Real ID measures for the last 20 years. However, that's all about to be coming to a conclusion, and every state is now expected to be in compliance with the Real ID as of May 7th, 2025. So less than, or just a month away. And in January, 1 week before Trump returned to the White House, the TSA published the final rule for enforcement of Real ID compliant ID cards. Beginning on May 7th, Americans attempting to board commercial flights or enter federal buildings will need to display state-issued driver's license and identification cards that meet the security requirements established by the Real ID Act. Former TSA Administrator David Pekoske said, in January, Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005 to enhance security standards for ID directly in response to the security vulnerabilities highlighted by the 9/11 attacks. Identity verification is foundational to security. And one form of Real ID compliant identification, because just to be clear, you can go to like anybody who's gone to the DMV or whatever you got in your state, and gone there recently to get a new ID, you've probably noticed that you might have a new ID that has like a little star on it or some kind of mark on it that, or, like a hologram on it that makes it clear it's different than your usual. It might, for the most part, look like a standard ID, but it has deeper tools in it that are supposed to, prevent counterfeiting of IDs and just make it more able to prove whether or not it's real, right? So it makes it harder to fake identification cards. That's just the standard thing. But the other big thing that I've been warning for a while that they're promoting is called mobile driver's license, or MDLs, or simply a digital driver's license. Now, this is where it all starts to come together, where real ID and the mobile driver's license and digital ID come together. Mobile driver's licenses are digital identification stored on a smartphone, which that's kind of part of the problem. Maybe you might consider getting rid of the smartphone. Digital ID stored on a smartphone, which typically include the same information as physical driver's license and ID cards. At the moment, not all mobile driver's license are compliant with the requirements of the Real ID, but the TSA is giving a waiver to certain states to allow residents to continue to use mobile driver's license. And these are rolling out across North America in 3 common forms, including proprietary apps, which are owned by the local, state, or national governments, various state-approved apps like Smart ID, and Apple Wallet. These are kind of the ways they're allowing people to include their IDs. And as I've been warning you guys for years, this is part of the push towards one app to rule them all. Elon Musk has his idea about turning X into the WeChat of the West, and WeChat is, of course, the Chinese app that basically everybody gets on all the time, and it has access to everything. It's got your credit card information, it's got your health information, it's got your banking, it's got everything in one single app. It's so convenient, so useful. But this is also the beginning of trapping people within this digital mainframe. And so we need to resist this where we can. According to a guide about digital driver's licenses, users will open their chosen app, scan the front and back of their physical driver's license, and then verify their identity with a selfie or similar biometric data, something very similar to what appears to be already starting on Twitter. Once verified, the user can begin using their digital ID app as they would a physical ID card. So you got to get your physical ID, scan it with your phone, and it confirms that information, take a picture of your face, and then boom. And then when you go out, you can just show them your phone and look, here's my digital ID. According to government technology, at least 5 million Americans have already signed up for mobile driver's licenses in 11 states that have interoperable programs fully implemented. GovTech determined these figures using public records requests, and they also note that at least a dozen other states, including California, are already conducting pilots or will soon be launching their own mobile driver's license programs. GovTech notes that states like Iowa, Colorado, and Utah have partnerships with businesses and government agencies to accept their mobile IDs. And these businesses, this is the interesting part, is the businesses which have the highest rate of adoption are those which serve or sell products like liquor or cannabis. And I found that to be interesting because, well, potheads want their weed, and alcoholics or people who like to drink, they want their liquor. So if you go into a store and they're like, sorry guys, we can't sell you your weed or we can't sell you your booze anymore unless you get this mobile driver's license, this digital ID. My guess is that most people are going to comply because they don't want to miss out on having their daily drink or their daily joint that they love to have. And that's just another way to squeeze this. I've been telling you guys this since 2019 when I wrote my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, that one of the ways they're going to squeeze you into this system is through convenience, entertainment. So that's why one of the first places they started testing out facial recognition and this sort of thing was football stadiums. And actually, I had a friend tell me the other day he went to a baseball game with a friend, and that there was literally no way, baseball or basketball, there was no way to get into the stadium without some sort of digital, scanning of your ID and of the ticket. So they're already testing these things out, and I feel like they understand that sports games and getting weed and alcohol, these are the kind of people that for the most part are just going to comply because they want to get in and they want to enjoy whatever. They're not going to be very questioning. Other businesses that are accepting mobile driver's license, including credit unions, security firms, real estate companies, auto body shops, and healthcare organizations. Back in May 2021, the American Civil Liberties Union discussed efforts to mandate digital driver's license, and in a report titled Identity Crisis, they warned that the use of digital driver's licenses, quote, raises the danger that there will be no balanced assessment of the costs and benefits of such a system, and that we will adopt systems that do not strike the balance between the the right balance between the needs for identification, security, and convenience, and Americans' well-founded aversion to government and corporate surveillance and regimentation. Jay Stanley, who is a senior policy with the ACLU's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project, said that the switch to digital IDs would have big implications for American life. Quote, if not done right, digital driver's licenses could be disastrous for privacy, increase inequity, and lead to pervasive ID checks in American life, including on the internet. That's another big part of what this is coming back to, my friends, on the internet. They want there to be an internet ID where you can't get online, you can't access information without proving who you are. And that is a dangerous step in the wrong direction. This is why we must resist digital IDs in all fronts. In June 2022, the Center for Human Rights and Global Justice at NYU School of Law issued a 100-page report detailing the growing dangers of reliance on digital ID around the world. The report was titled Paving a Digital Road to Hell, and it examined the role of the World Bank and other international networks that have been promoting digital ID for years. They point a finger at the World Bank and ID4D initiative, which is a program which was received a catalytic investment from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Omidyar Network, as well as various governments. ID4D, you should know about that, the World Bank. And the report from NYU says, quote, we have noted that the World Bank and its ID4D initiative do not stand alone in pursuing the digital agenda. They exist within a global network of organizations and individuals. In addition to governments like the UK, US, and France, philanthropic organizations and banks are also part of this. And the NYU report also points a finger at private biometric corporations like IDEMIA, Thales, and Gemalto. And I've previously reported on the role that the Thales Group is doing in advancing digital ID in both Mexico and the United States. There's a link to that report right there. Finally, digital ID and facial recognition. This is how these things tie together. With compliance with the Real ID Act, while compliance with the Real ID Act does not currently require digital ID, mobile driver's licenses are the first step in that direction. In fact, the TSA has already got a page on their website where they make it clear that they are willing to accept digital IDs from states which have begun to roll them out, and they offer a convenient map to highlight the states which are using digital IDs. And here's a little video. I'll just play it. We're not going to listen to the audio, but this is just the TSA's website showing us how convenient. Look, I've got a digital ID. You just walk up, show it to the friendly, helpful TSA person that totally doesn't hate their life and will never be rude to you. And you get to walk in and fly. And this is what freedom's like. This video is titled TSA Digital ID is Here. This is not far off, my friends. The TSA's website says, use your smartphone for identity verification with digital identity solutions like mobile driver's licenses or ID passes, now accepted at TSA checkpoints through platforms such as Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, and Samsung Wallet, or a state-issued app. So for the moment, Americans have 4 options for presenting ID. You can tap or scan a digital ID, you can show a driver's license, state-issued ID, or passport. Passport is personally the only type of ID I have. But it's worth noting that at the same time the TSA is accepting mobile driver's licenses and real ID compliant IDs, they are also testing out biometric facial recognition cameras at international terminals across the United States. In fact, the TSA's own website says TSA officers now use biometric cameras to assist them with identity verification. This photo is optional. They also claim that all the photo and personal data are deleted after verification. And while they're saying this is currently optional, anybody who's flown recently, especially international, guys, if you've seen this, there are no signs. If there's any signs, I've seen 1 or 2, they are not well placed where you can see them. So the average person, especially those who've been trained well during COVID-19 '84, they have no idea that they can say no. So you walk up to the terminal like you walk up to your flight, you're getting ready to leave, right? And in that process, they might have like a little tablet on a stand in front of you, and when you would typically hand them your ticket, they'll just tell you, okay, go ahead, look here. And most people just walk up, obediently put their face there, it scans them, and then they get to go. What I recommend you do is step to the side. Don't step in front of the tablet. Make it very clear, like, here you go, here's my thing. And if they ask you, say no, thank you. You have that right. The more people who say no, thank you, we might be able to avert these things from becoming mandatory. But if we don't even try to resist them because we're afraid, because it's convenient, blah, 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 whatever, it's going to get worse. So if you're flying, just like you should be opting out of the body scanners, and I know they're going to grope you, and that's not a good thing. But if more and more people were resisting these things and pushing back, instead of it just being me and Miriam or a couple of people in line, because when we do it, 98% of the people are going ahead and advancing through and just doing the facial recognition, doing the body scanners. If we don't push back, my friends, it's going to get worse. And as I said, they're going to test this out at sports stadiums, the airport, places where people are kind of like, you want to make that flight. So you're kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say no and then miss my flight or be late or whatever. And they know that. So they're testing it out on these places where they can squeeze us. And this is where we need to push back the most. So let's continue here as we wrap this up. While this is currently optional, as I said, the TSA has received pushback for not adequately notifying the public. And in fact, former TSA Administrator David Pekoske, he actually admitted that the government's long-term goal is to make biometric scanning mandatory. In early February, the DHS's Inspector General announced an audit into the TSA relating to the use of facial recognition technology after a bipartisan coalition of representatives sent a letter making a formal request for an investigation. And this came because the lawmakers note that 2 years ago, in April 2023, former TSA Administrator Pekoske, he was in Austin, Texas for the South by Southwest conference. And during the talk, he said, quote, "We will get to the point where we will require biometrics across the board." So despite them claiming that this is all optional, they're already making it noted that this is going to be mandatory at some point. And Wired Magazine recently acknowledged that digital passports and facial recognition are rapidly expanding and represent a threat to privacy. Wired Magazine wrote, quote, "While ending frustrating airport lines would be welcome for many, the shift to digital travel document also raises concerns about how data is protected, a normalization of problematic surveillance technology such as face recognition, plus whether digital ID systems will be rolled out to other parts of society, and who ultimately controls or builds these pieces of infrastructure." And the dangers of facial recognition are not new. As far back as 2019, the Georgetown Law Center for Privacy and Technology released a report titled "America Under Watch: Face Surveillance in the United States." And I've been warning about this since back then, that Americans need to be paying attention to the rise of facial recognition technology. And I go into this a little bit further about digital IDs and how this is all part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They're trying to teach people that having a digital ID is a human right. But finally, what I wrote here is that although many people believed a Kamala Harris presidency would all but guarantee the expansion of dangerous programs like digital IDs, I warned before the election that no matter who is president, the infrastructure was already in place and that these schemes would expand. With Donald Trump promising to secure elections by aligning with the goals of the Real ID Act of 2005, we are ensured to see an increase in calls for making digital ID mandatory. And in fact, Trump continues to call for a biometric entry and exit system as the solution to fighting illegal immigration, making it clear that some version of digital IDs backed by facial recognition will soon be the norm in the United States. And of course, if you guys want solutions, I always recommend download my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, or listen to the free audiobook, which you can find at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. And I wrote this book in late 2019, published January 2020, right when COVID came about. And of course, COVID helped expand the push towards digital IDs with vaccine passports. The book was updated in December 2022. If you want some ideas on solutions, I encourage you to check that out. And of course, my article you can find at thelastamericanvagabond.com, Real ID, Voter ID, and Digital ID, the Future of American Identification. It will, of course, be in the show notes as everything. But like I started out saying, the immigration issue is a real issue, but they are playing you. This is how they get us. They put us in between a rock and a hard place. So what is the answer? Do nothing? Because some people say, well, what do you want us to do, Derrick? Don't do anything. Let all the illegals run over the country. Let violent gang members come in here. Let people vote whether or not they're American citizens. No, that's not what I'm advocating for. Personally, I'm an anarchist, and I think that government shouldn't be in control of borders in the first place. I think the only thing you can control is your own private property. And but I know that we're far away from that world. And so I understand that, but I'm not in favor of increasing the power of the state because some of you are afraid, especially when, like I said, there's a lot of false claims out there about voter fraud and about illegal voting. Yes, it does happen, but every single case, just as one example, that Trump brought to that his team, Sidney Powell and all these other people about the election was thrown out of court. And you could argue, well, that's just because the deep state, blah, blah, whatever. Or you could just recognize that those claims that they raised a lot of money off from desperate people on the right wing and the MAGA crowd, most of them were false. Now, that doesn't mean that voter fraud doesn't happen and can't happen. This is another reason I don't trust voting. The voting machines, Diebold voting machines can be hacked. The answer in my mind is, sure, ask for an ID, but not a digital ID. Use the good old plastic card if somebody wants to verify themselves. And then at the same time, we could not militarize the border, right? How about we actually have sensible border policy if we're going to have a border at all? And again, I'm saying this as an anarchist who doesn't really believe in borders, but I also understand that there are insane people who will weaponize immigration to try to achieve what they have now. This is what they want. They want us to be at a place where, like, please, daddy government, mommy government, big sis, big bro, save us from the horrible immigrants. They're the problem. And it's just another trap, another way to further divide the population against themselves instead of recognizing that the people at the top of the pyramid are the real problem. So don't fall into that trap, my friends. I know it's a complex situation. It's not easy, but it's not as black and white as people would like you to think that, oh, the immigrants are the problem. We just need to round them all up and get rid of them. Or we just need to have digital ID and everything will be great. We can fix the elections. That's not the goal of these people. It's to build the technocratic state that I've been warning about for years.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.